So it's nice to be here and talk to everybody. I think this is a community who are actually know a whole lot more about infrastructure for research computing than I do. So I'm a little nervous, but I decided what I will do is talk about the things I know more about. And specifically, TAMU-ViDaL is a secure, compliant infrastructure where, let's see if I can, okay, there we go, where the goal here is that compliance. I know all HPRC systems are very secure, so I won't talk to that part, but what I wanted to focus on today was the compliance layer that sits on top of that, that's required for something of this nature. So after that, I'll talk a little bit about the pros and cons in summary. As a heavy user myself, I'm the director of ViDaL, but I'm mainly a user. I have really great staff and support from HPRC. They're really collaborators that they actually know much more about the system side of this. And then if time permits, I might talk to some of the design principles behind ViDaL. So before I go on, I wanted to actually ask people if you can just say something in the chat box. How many of you know what I mean when I say compliant data infrastructure? Does that everybody here know what I mean when I say that?
You can also respond with a reaction. Yes, so we have a thumbs up. A number of people that said no.
Okay. As we do that, so let me tell you a little bit about what I'm thinking when I say that. As you can already see on the screen, this is my favorite picture. It's from Gary King. It was in the special issue on data science and science in 2011. It's from the one social science article in there by Gary King. And I love it because it really does give you an appreciation of all the details that's required when you are handling and analyzing person-level data. And so this might be why you need a compliant data infrastructure. A compliant system usually means all projects have to get approval either before or after the fact, or it's getting logged and there may be audits. All activity is monitored and subject to audits, as well as it's mostly a closed system in that data cannot leave the system easily. And if you need to it's impossible to have a closed system that has nothing leaving, but whatever data leaves the system is properly monitored and sometimes audited. And examples of systems like this are, I'm familiar with VA Vinci system, which is set up to analyze EHR data from the VA population. There are many people who call this data enclaves, and there are many that exist in different universities, including NORC. The Federal Census RDC, which we A&M also have, is another one of these compliant data infrastructures. But I think for those of you who use it, we know that it's very restrictive in terms of the data that's allowed to get analyzed there. It's restricted to federal government data only. So if you have projects that are person level data that is not one of those data sets that they handle, then you can't use it. So these are common systems in this space. So now that I've explained a little bit more, if any of you have experience using it, I just want to get a quick poll of how many people have used compliance systems to do their own research. And it helps me to know who the audience is when I talk about details. So I thought I would check on that before I go into this more. Like raise of hands if you've used any kind of compliance system that is more than just an HPRC system that's secure. Okay. On the chat box, I think we have very little response. On the few pictures I have, I can't see everybody's picture. I don't see any hands raised. So I'm gonna kind of go on the assumption not many of you have used the system, and we're going to continue. So as I said, we're talking about TAMU-ViDaL, which stands for Virtual Data Library. The goals of the system is to have a secure and legally compliant data infrastructure that can support TAMU-wide research. So anybody at TAMU who needs to do these kinds of analysis. And again, I will focus on the legally compliant part of this. The actual facility is housed in the West Data Center that has all the normal things that you need for physical security. The hardware is based on data-intensive cloud computing nodes, such as large and fast RAMs. We have nodes up to 1.55 terabytes and GPU nodes. System software-wise, we utilize virtual machines, Linux operating systems, and Windows operating systems. I'd like to talk just a little bit about the Windows operating system in that I'm familiar with traditional HPRC, which is the main research infrastructure in the US, usually does not work with Windows. It was very important when we put this together to have support for Windows because many of the researchers who handle person level data are social scientists and public health researchers who've never interacted with a Linux type of operating system. And so it was very important for us to get Windows support. The TAMU-HPR system, who has also not done Windows prior to the ViDaL system, have been really good partners in going out of their way to quickly learn to support that user base. And I believe that was one of the key reasons for our success. We are 2 years into the project and we currently have about 80 users. And I recently did a poll because I had to do a report. But I was also surprised at how successful we were in terms of the number of users and projects on the system. Almost all of them rely on Windows because the PIs as well as the user base is a Windows user-based system. So if you're one of the HPRC systems and you don't do Windows support, you might consider sort of going into that space if this is important. We have basic analytical software like R and Python, more statistical stuff like SAS data, MATLAB. And then the last component of the data library, it is a virtual data library. So, there's data there. At the current time, ViDaL is more of a nice building with good rooms set up so that researchers can do their, let's say, compliant data research. So most of the data is brought in by the PI. So I always refer to this as a library. This is the building with good rooms with locks on them that we need, that we can give out keys to people on the team that need it. And it would be nice if the library also had some books. And the more books we have that is readily available for researchers, the better. That's the last tier of our infrastructure, and we haven't gone too far. We've started to build a little bit of a data repository, such as like the HCUP that is by ARC, Medicare CMS data, Texas Discharge Public Use data, as well as some census data. Another important part of this data infrastructure is, I say public data infrastructure, but it's more semi-public in that the main purpose of these data sets that we have is to facilitate researchers on campus who would like to use this data for research. It isn't like totally like a public library where anybody can come in and just use the data. That is because it is a compliant data infrastructure. So all of these data sets have use regulations of its own. What's key here is to understand this concept of a data custodian. So you can be a PI, you don't have to be a data custodian for other people, and you can just do your project and you can just not share. That's okay. But if you are one and you would actually like to do more collaborations and grow your research, then you can also go into what I call the semi-public index of data sets available. And you can tell the people via the index, I've got these data sources. If you're interested, please talk to me. And then every data set, as I said, I actually am the data custodian for HCUP, which is ARC, and Medicare CMS, which is CMS. The rules are different. So depending on what data sets it is, anyone who wants to use these data sets will have to go through approval processes. Often they're not processes that the PI, decide. It's actually processes that are set up by the original agency and data custodians that gave me the data. I purchased this data to the extent possible so that it's got a broad use space, so that what I'm actually doing is to say, if you're a graduate student or a faculty who wants to use this data set, these data sets are not trivially cheap. So if you would like to do that, but you don't have money to purchase it yourself, talk to me. You don't have to pay money because I've set it up so that I can try to support that, but you still have to go through training and approval processes as appropriate for each data set. So what's important here is if you're in this compliant data infrastructure space, you really have to appreciate that there are lots of data custodians that are responsible for meeting the privacies of the people in the data sets, and they have different rules, and it's unfortunate, but we all have to follow them if you're gonna do this kind of research. The infrastructure itself was supported, and it started with Texas A&M's internal peer review funding mechanism, which is the Research Development Fund from the VPR office in spring of 2018, and we were able to put the system together. it's a lot of people working together. This is just a slide of all the different people that helped me put the idea together and keep me running. The core team is the management team. It's a team of 5 of us. I'm the director. We have 3 associate directors composed of 2 other faculty. Bobek is at engineering, and Mark is in College of Liberal Arts, School of Public Health, where I'm from. These 3 colleges are the biggest user groups, so it makes sense that there are 3 users from these 3 heavy expert users from these universities. We meet once a semester to make all the critical decisions. And then we also have the director of HPRC, Han Gao, who has always been a partner in all of these efforts, who is in those meetings making decisions with us, as well as the TAMU privacy officer, John Pride. And I can't say enough good things about John Pride. I think he was hired just about when we started the project. And I think a lot of successes on ViDaL is all because John can keep all the compliance stuff together. I certainly can. I'm not an expert. I just try to keep things going so that I can do research. And then we have a list of advisory boards that have different expertise, including secure cloud computing, legal expertise. We have a lawyer who is an actual expertise is in information privacy. We have data repository expertise from Bruce at the library, as well as IRB expertise. I serve on the IRB, but so does Eva. And all of these people are available. If your particular project as a PI run into different problems, I try to connect you. And then what the user work group is it's actually, we have a representative from each unit that has a user on ViDaL. This is because PIs who are not familiar with these systems, there's a lot to learn and navigate. And so this is a peer learning support system where we're helping each other keep the system going and shared well. The core of this is to design a secure system that is under the privacy by design principle. And what we mean by this is we consider human level data as delicate, hazardous, but very valuable research material. And as such, we must know how to handle these hazardous data like we do all hazardous research material. It requires that we have a safe environment to handle them in. Those would be those closed computer servers that work as the system lab. We need proper handling procedures. Those procedures and protocols are really important. They include what software are allowed to run on the data, as well as all the training protocols and application and approval processes, such that those processes are not too heavy and can be streamlined. And at the final goal of this is to minimize the risk for information privacy. And we take a very holistic approach where we use a mix of technology, governance, as well as transparency on operations, so that we can all do this in a safe but efficient manner. And that's at the core of how we do this. I think given the time, I'm not going to go into too much detail. To me, again, compliant computing is a lot like the physical, security systems where there's a lot of logging and documenting. There's a lot of doing due diligence. So when there's an audit, we can show that we've been doing things correctly. It's about meeting those legal responsibilities as PI and as A&M organizations. There's a lot of training involved. So each PI is responsible for the whole team to follow protocol and make sure that they get all the trainings that they need, as well as the keeping current. And this is really key because the compliant data computing, I would say, landscape is changing so quickly that keeping up with all these changes in security, as well as the legal requirements and ethical requirements, is quite a task. But it's important if you're a PI working in this space, to reasonably keep current. And if you use ViDaL, we help you do that. So we make sure that all the security things that need to be kept current, you don't have to worry about as PI. Han Gao's team does a great job keeping the systems security current. John Pride, who's the privacy officer, is very good at keeping all the legal stuff current, as well as the ethical stuff. And because it's not, compliant computing isn't about just HIPAA or just FERPA. It actually goes across so many different laws that don't come together so well in a coherent way, that if you're a PI doing this research like I am, what it comes down to is your ability to work well with on-campus security experts and privacy experts so that you can meet your PI responsibilities, which is almost impossible without the help that we have. And I think ViDaL provides both the computer as well as that extra layer because it streamlines those processes. just as important as that compliance layer, meeting those legal responsibility, is usability. As a PI and having a team of people who have to meet deliverables and deadlines, when the system is too heavy and it's not usable, it really can't work. And so we do the best we can, trying to meet all the requirements using virtual machines as well as software, allowing for remote access, making it easy for PIs to host collaborators, whether they're at A&M or not. So we've set up the system in the most usable possible. And as a heavy user myself, I think I often prioritize usability as long as there is not a legal or security hole that is we have to meet. And that's something you have to deal with. I'm not going to go into the details of the computer specifications due to time, but those are all available on the public website. Here's my summary of the pros and cons of the system as a heavy user. I think immediately, it is really giving us a lot of benefit. Before ViDaL, a lot of people were in locked offices with computers off the internet. Now you don't have to do that for the most part. For the time being, during our pilot process, this is totally free for anyone who's a person at A&M who's a faculty. You get a secure system with all the software you need and a lot of help from John Pride's office getting documents signed that you need for legal things. And it makes it really, really easy to collaborate across campus because you're on one computer system. For longer term, as I mentioned, we're trying to build a bigger semi-public data repository. Some of the immediate cons that come to mind is it is true, you must have your research planned out much better than you might not have to in an HPR system, because you have to get approval and it must state what your research goals are, what data you'll be bringing into the system, who will have access to the data. And you need to think about termination plans. I know lots of PIs who are not used to this. They don't worry about termination when they haven't even started the project, but it's important that all of these elements are in the application so we know that you have a plan. If you don't know how to do this and you reach out, we will help you through that peer support system to set up, submit your application. But honestly, in the 2 years that I've had, the application is a pretty simple Google Forms, and I've had very few questions come my way. So we haven't really needed to do it. But I kept it very simple. If the PI submit the application and there are more questions, instead of asking a lot of questions up front, which is what some other compliance systems do, I ask very basic fundamental questions. If the answer is yes, and we need to follow up, then there is follow-up email from the compliance part of A&M. That has nothing to do with ViDaL or me. What I do is just send I gather information and send it along to the right place so that the process can be streamlined. And so the other part of this is, ViDaL is, as a compliance system, just not as usable as a totally open system, but those are for good reasons. And I think I put the last two on the con side. It says all activities monitored on the system with audits, and PIs are responsible for all team members. That's a general user comment, but I would say as a PI responsible for things, I have lots of large Medicaid claims data on projects that I do that I'm responsible for, that I would not do those projects if I didn't have all the activities monitored, and that I had a system where I had help making sure that my team members were going through proper training, keeping up with things. It's just not something an individual PI can take responsibility for. But in the current day, if you are a PI of a project that requires this kind of large databases, you have to be responsible for it. So having a system like ViDaL really helps you, because on the one hand, you are a user. On the other hand, you are the compliance officer for your team, your research team. And if this ViDaL system for me is very easy for me to keep a team together, especially when you have students that are coming in and out of your projects, that it's very clear what they have to do in terms of protocols and training, what are protocols when you're in the room handling the data. All of those are very well streamlined. So it makes it very easy for me to be a responsible PI is the core of this. I'm gonna say I'm at 120, so I'm almost done. These are the guidance principles I use when I design the system. It's a risk-based compliance, meaning we tier it. There's 4 tiers here. And so based on your data and risk involved, if your data is very light, like the identified data, then it's low risk, then you have the easiest access system. If your data involves very heavy, very higher risks, such as identifiers, then you're at the higher compliance. And so we have tiered the system so that you don't have to do everything for everybody. We avoid redundant approval processes that are already at A&M. So the best example is the IRB approval process. Not all projects on ViDaL need an IRB approval, but if you do, it's up to the PI to make that judgment call, apply and get approval from IRB. And sometimes if you're not sure, when you do the application, I'll have to ask you, what is your understanding of this? And I will have gotten answers that say, the PI says, I don't actually understand this. Then what I ask them to do is actually do a human subject determination application, which is a very short application. And the IRB will tell you whether you need to get approval or not. If you do, then they will help you go through the process to get approval. But you can't come to ViDaL if you may potentially need human subjects protection without an IRB approval process, and that's because we can't replicate that process for you. And then we try to empower PIs in such a way. I talked about this extensively before. The goal here is to make it possible for PIs to be responsible PIs when you're doing projects like this. So my goal is to give you tools, the same tools I need to be a responsible PI. And then the important thing is, this is something that we started 2 years ago. We have continuously been checking all of the procedures and processes and adjusting them as I go. So if you're an actual user and you have input, I always welcome input as we try to improve the system. And I'm going to actually skip these details, but if you're interested, I have a paper that has all the details of the 4-tier system in terms of, how you set up usability as well as risk. And you can take a look at that or email me for more details. Bottom line, the compliance on ViDaL is no different than any other computer system at A&M. If you're a researcher at A&M, you have to follow the same compliance rules regardless of what computer you use. The only difference may be that if you use ViDaL, the process has been streamlined, and I help PIs reach the next step. Because sometimes, actually, when I was here first, it's even unclear what's the next step if you're a PI. So if you're using ViDaL, one thing I can help you with, or the ViDaL system can help you, is help you navigate the compliance system at A&M. Our sustainability business model is we're working together as a team this summer to put together a consortium structure so that each college or unit can have membership fees based on user base. All of that will be sorted out in the next year or two, and we'll be sharing more. The last thing I wanted to say is, if you're a student, you must find a faculty host, because you can't be responsible for things on the system by yourself. This is another thing. You are approved on a project basis, so each project must get its own approval. It's not like you get approval as a user. So just remember, different projects need different users. And this is my summary slide. I won't even read it. This is just my summary of how I do compliant research. Thank you.